That is such a lovely track, guys. Welcome to the Dark Side of Entrepreneurship podcast. This is actually a business podcast. My show was originally called as Brand Identity Design. I had an epiphany and I was like, let's change the name. Let's go to the dark side of entrepreneurship. I think it was a really cool name, which I borrowed from the internet and I went with it. So my new show, my show is now called as the dark side of entrepreneurship, where we explore the gritty realities behind the glamorous facade of business success. I'm your host, Jason. I'm live streaming this on LinkedIn. And today we are deep diving into some uncharted territory, guys. Really uncharted territory. And this is called as mental health. Now picture this, a world where creativity is the king, where innovation thrives, where entrepreneurs dare to dream big. But lurking beneath these surfaces are silent struggles that a few dare to talk about. And I'm not referring to anything else. I'm referring to depression. Depression which haunts the creative space in the creative world. In this episode, me and Jared, we are both going to be shedding some light on the dark corners of the creative industry where managing depression is like a daily battle. From the highs of inspiration to the lows of despair, we will uncover the raw truth behind the glitz and glamour. This is gonna be so freaking cool, guys. But fear not, dear listeners, because we are not here just to dwell onto the problem or just highlight the problem. We are here to find solution, discover strategies, and help you navigate the turbulent waters of depression in the creative world. I would encourage you to grab your headphones, settle in, relax, breathe in, breathe out, prepare to be inspired, because this podcast episode is going to be like a lifeline for those who dare to dream in the shade of darkness. And I'm going to be doing this because this episode is inspired by Jared, who is going to bravely share his personal journey grappling with ADHD, acute anxiety, and persistent depression while navigating the fast paced, demanding world of design. Now, in case if you don't know who Jared is a multidisciplinary graphic designer with a focus on brand identity design, similar to me. But he has more experience, with 10 years of experience in the design industry. He has been a partner at Ottawa based studio called Salt. He also worked as a freelancer for a variety of agencies and companies, led a brand team for a global startup called Perpetua. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And he also began his most recent solo design practice with his firm called Only Child, which is into website branding. And he's that individual who believes that humans come first. He's artist comes second and designer is the third. So Jared is such an awesome person. So I just want to formally welcome Jared. Let's have some applause for Jared. Jared, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jason. That was a very poetic introduction. I'm impressed.
Thank you. I just want to let people know that Jared, being he's a designer, of course, but he's also into punk music. He is a very, very creative guy. And he has shared me a SoundCloud link, which I will definitely have it on the show notes, just in case if you want to check out some of his music. I want to welcome some of my friends to my podcast. So I want to shout out to Izzy, who once again suggested and recommended Jared to be a guest on my show. Second, I want to thank Wade and Leslie. These guys are regular listeners to my show. And I see Angela, who is down there in the listening lounge. So welcome, Angela. So nice to see you. Angela is going to be a guest very soon on my podcast. So thank you so much, guys, for your love and support. My first thing, which I want to ask you, Jared, is just out of curiosity. Why did you name this business, your solo agency, as Only Child? What's the story behind it?
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of like I'm a big fan of satire and kind of like not really taking the world too seriously. And I'm also a self-confessed or professed cynic, I guess. So I grew up an only child, and I think a lot of my creative spirit just, nurtured itself just kind of like exploring creativity and playing by myself when I was younger, and just like really figuring out the world on my own. But that kind of, as I grew up and developed and started dealing with mental health challenges, I found a lot of solace in isolation, and a lot of my inspiration, and sort of like my ideas come from just like self-reflection and sort of like taking that step back from the world and kind of just like being on my own. So with that being said, I'm also kind of like this multidisciplinary person that tries to attack any creative challenge, and it's kind of all done by myself. So that was kind of the inspiration behind it. Just growing up an only child, it's a little bit funny, a little bit satirical. Maybe opposing the status quo a little bit because it's kind of a sarcastic name, I guess, in some sense. But it also kind of just like sheds a little bit of humor on the idea that we're all just kind of figuring it out on our own. So that's kind of the inspiration behind it. But really, it's just I'm an only child and I do a lot of stuff alone. And I thought it was a funny name for me to be to a funny moniker for me to adapt.
That makes total sense. I appreciate you giving me clarity. Why did you name it Only Child? Being raised by a single mother is definitely challenging, not only for the child, but also for the mother at the same time. My father was away for around, I think, around 20 years. He used to work in the Middle East. Okay, and my mom used to
Okay.
look after me. And it was not just me. Okay, I had a younger brother, a sister. So it was a
Mhm.
mess, man. Okay.
I can imagine. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was quieter probably at my house, but same thing. I have a deep appreciation for my mother as a single mother because she was my rock growing up, and definitely guided a lot of my moral values and ethics and stuff too. So
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, I know our listeners are really patient because they really want to hear your story. Okay, so let's actually deep dive into our topic. Now I've
yeah.
been thinking about, we had like a pre call before, heading to this interview just a few weeks back. And I was
Mhm.
trying to gather all the notes, and I really wanted to understand, this thing about depression. Okay, it's not that I have not experienced depression, but I think everybody experiences depression in a different way. According to
Yep.
you, okay, would you consider depression to be like a disability, or do you think it's a superpower, or does it really depend on how the individual is harnessing it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you definitely articulated like one of the factors is it's definitely how the individual harnesses it. I mean, like from a national perspective, Canada that's like it recognizes depression as a disability. Same thing with anxiety. So any kind of clinical mental illness is recognized as a disability because it does hinder your ability to perform at the same pace, rates, or with the same enthusiasm as other people. But that being said, I think it's a little bit dangerous to kind of like, especially now with like a lot of this ADHD and neurodiversity research coming out and all this communication. And then also, like the toxic aspects of how social media can get a little bit out of hand with, popular topics and stuff. I think it's a little bit dangerous to just blanket say that mental health or ADHD or anxiety is a superpower because in my experience at my darkest, I've been in situations where I was afraid that this was coming to an end. And to put it more abruptly, in my darkest moments, I did not want to exist anymore. So while the positive aspects of the traits that come with deep thinking and deep feeling can contribute to a beneficial life or a beneficial creative career, I think it's pretty dangerous to just blanket say that it's a superpower because it diminishes the fact that a lot of people are really struggling with the symptoms of mental health while also seemingly performing as well as others. So that's why it's kind of a silent disability, and it's kind of dangerous because a lot of people deal with that on their own. They may not have the strength or support networks to come out and speak up about it and seek support, and then that results in some really damaging effects. So I think it's pretty damaging to just blanket say that it's a superpower. But I do think the traits that come along with an anxious mind or somebody that cares deeply or has a lot of empathy can be beneficial things, especially in design. I mean, empathy is at the core of every design challenge that we tackle. So if you can empathize with people, you can, solve their challenges. But the more you empathize, the more curious you are about the world, the more you discover. And as they say, ignorance can often be bliss. So I think, if you're a deep thinker and a deep feeler and you learn a lot about the world and how commerce works and how business works and stuff, that can sometimes reflect very negatively on your ego and your moods and stuff. So yeah, I mean, in short, I think it's like, yes, I do believe that people that struggle with mental health definitely have a deeper thirst for understanding and seeking purpose, which can drive them. But a lot of people become burdened with the symptoms and they don't have the capacity to like find that purpose or the clarity through it all. So
That makes so much sense. So this is a very different perspective, and on in terms of what I've been hearing from a lot of people, in terms of most people who have mental health related issues, kind of embrace it, and I think psychiatrists and psychotherapists, and I'm not saying all of them, maybe majority of them would try to encourage you and try to give you that positive outlook towards things, and they would want you to have it, imagine it to be like a superpower. Maybe you have some of your senses working slightly different than others, and maybe this curiosity part which you said, maybe that helps such individuals to be more curious. So according to you, from what I understand, is that it's dangerous to really call it as a superpower, because people might be really struggling with this. So don't
yeah.
treat it like a superpower. Work on it. And don't even call it as a disability. Would you say that it is a disability as well?
For sure, it's definitely a disability. Like I would say, when I have jobs, I struggle to succeed. When I work for myself, I succeed more often, and that's because some of the anxieties and pressures that come from these like societal norms are barriers for myself, and they actually hinder my ability to perform at my full potential. And I've realized that just through experience and stuff, and trying different things and stuff. But that being said, I think like, it can be a superpower. And I think, going to therapy and understanding psychology, understanding your symptoms and how they can transform into superpowers is the narrative that we should be talking about. We shouldn't say you have a superpower and therefore you'll be okay. Because like even like if you think about like the Marvel universe, I'm sure Superman, the first time he saw through a wall, he wasn't sure what to do with that ability, right? So even superpowers have to learn how to harness those superpowers in mature and developed and positive manners. Because if you can shoot lasers out of your eyes, you have the ability to do a lot of self harm and outward harm. But if you learn how to control those lasers, you can focus them into something that can, save humanity or protect communities, as the superhero metaphor goes. But that being said, I think you need to understand those superpowers. You need to understand the roots and foundations of those superpowers, and then from there you can understand how they can become positive factors in your life. And then you can also like you can unblock barriers for yourself mentally and stuff, because you have a deeper understanding of like why you feel certain ways and why you respond to certain situations in a certain way. So like understanding, I think, becomes the path to those superpowers being a positive force for yourself, I think. So in my experience, I've done loads of research. I've read books about my disorders. I've gone to therapy. I've done everything I possibly can to understand it without going to psychology school, so that I can understand how best to manage my own symptoms and my own life in a way that's going to be the most fulfilling, I guess.
So I think I understand this perfect, and I think you explained it very profoundly. So it's not about considering it to be a superpower, or it is a disability, but if you know how to manage it well, okay, if you know how to make the best out of it, then obviously you can do something good with it, right? I mean, that would be the idea.
Exactly.
So that is super
Yep.
cool. That's like a really, really different perspective. Okay, now in terms of harnessing it, okay, would you mind maybe taking back maybe in a moment in your life personally where you felt the weight of these mental health challenges you were experiencing was like very big, very huge. And how did you harness that, and how did you push through?
Yeah, so I'll give you a really good anecdote. So I mean, at the age of 18 or 17, I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression. And I've gone all of my life kind of just assuming that was the end all. So I've been on medications to sort of manage those symptoms for a long time, but my depression has never really gone away. And as I've gotten older and start dealing with more adult and mature problems, it became more of a burden. So of course I've had ups and downs. But in the last year or so, with the pandemic, working at home, all these kind of changes in life and society and stuff, I found myself really struggling, especially with like the grip that social media can have on sort of like people that seek these like dopamine fixes, which ADHD brains do. So that being said, I basically was never diagnosed with ADHD. So last year, I was really struggling at my job. I decided to take a mental health leave because I was in a really dark place, and I was just like, "There's got to be something wrong with me beyond what's going on." So I took a mental health leave, decided to sort of seek a updated, I guess, diagnosis, and it turns out I was diagnosed with both inattentive and hyperactive ADHD. So you can have hyperactive ADHD or inattentive, or you can have combined. So hyperactive is essentially just like a busy body. Inattentive is a busy mind, just to put it in simple terms. And then combined is essentially a little bit of both. So I have a very busy brain, but I also want to keep busy and stay focused on something so that I can sort of quiet that noise in my brain. So that kind of resulted, especially coming from a very fast-paced industry where there's lots of analyzing, research, lots of ideas and inspiration. I started becoming so unfocused and not able to function in life, in work, to a point where I was putting all of my energy into trying to succeed in life. And then any time that I had left over was essentially just like refreshing my batteries or recharging sort of thing. So I sought this new diagnosis, and it started giving me a little bit more clarity and refocusing myself. And then going to therapy and getting these medications and stuff, I started really understanding that ADHD is a different thing that needs to be managed in different ways. And I started realizing a lot of the challenges were turning into clear pathways that I either needed to remove from my life or to sort of like change and move into. So most recently, I kind of like really did this deep reflection and challenged myself to just say like, find your path again and start walking down that path to, find an appropriate destination instead of just walking aimlessly, hoping that a destination appears, I guess, so to speak. So that being said, I guess harnessing, so with ADHD, we have a very strong ability to hyper focus on things that we really enjoy. So, again, being an only child and dealing with this like thirst for creativity, I think my entire life has been like, I guess I've revolved my entire upbringing around learning how to be more creative in all endeavors that I do. So, my ability to learn fast and to learn quickly has been an advantage. I'm a musician. I can play drums. I can play guitar, bass. I sing. I can write lyrics. I can write copy. I design websites. I develop websites. I do logos. I do all kinds of different things. And that's just because I burned myself out for 15 years, just throwing myself into creativity essentially because I had unmanaged symptoms that were kind of like forcing me to hyper focus on things that I wanted to. So while I was becoming very creative, I wasn't necessarily learning other skills or performing in life in my responsibilities and stuff. So like that's the double-edged sword of it being a superpower is I become really good at these things that I throw myself into, but then I would struggle to find ways to implement them into anything that would give me a living or find my way in society. So I mean, I did an okay job of doing that, and I think all of these positive traits helped and influenced me become a better creative. They, that curiosity, that thirst, that hyperfixation on creativity definitely is the driving force that made me a strong creative. But through that, I created this burnout cycle where I had no ability to sort of move forward in my life anymore. So now that I'm dealing with new medications and therapies and stuff, I'm finding healthier ways to be creative. I'm finding that learning and executing work and challenging myself is easier. I'm more focused. So again, it just comes back to like understanding how you can harness those powers, understanding what things you need to do in your life, whether you like them or not, that will give you a more focused or clear ability to do those things. So, like, I'll tell you, I don't love taking medication, but I take this medication. My depression reduces, you know, like crazy, and I can sit down on my computer, work for 6 hours, and get some tasks done and feel good about my day. And then in the evening, I'm not dwelling on all the tasks that I felt I couldn't accomplish. And so, like, I have a more positive management system now that I've sort of taken a step back and refigured out what was going on. So again, I think it's just like harnessing those positive traits, and then when you can't harness them anymore, figure out how to harness those again. So for me, it was just getting that first diagnosis, understanding that my anxieties and depression were something that I needed help with. And then through getting help with that, I was able to become a stronger creative. But then once I created more barriers for myself, I took a step back instead of just trying to, move forward. And then once you understand a little bit better how you can manage symptoms, life, responsibilities, well-being, and all that stuff, then you can find this like perfect storm where, your mental health does truly become a superpower.
Absolutely, absolutely. So now a lot of interesting things which you have just highlighted and you have mentioned, and I appreciate you sharing a bit about your backstory and what you were dealing with. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Now,
Yeah.
you're harnessing your superpower and you're trying to break this cycle of depression as we go by, using different methods, maybe using therapy, medication, or, different mediums. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, according to you, okay, and I've been thinking about this question quite a lot. Now, as you progress in breaking this cycle, does it mean now you're normal?
Yeah, so that's a thing that I have a very interesting perspective on, and to me, I think normal is sort of it's all in perspective. It's like what side of the pond you're on, so to speak. And I think normal means a different thing in every country, every continent, every business, even. Like when you join a new company, they're going to have a mission, a vision, a set of values, and you're going to have to abide by those because that's sort of how you accomplish that mission and vision. So what's normal to one person may be normal to or abnormal to another, right? So I think as creatives, especially, we can be traditionally speaking more abnormal than I think your typical accountant or something. And that's not to say we're better or worse. It's to say that we're diverse. Everybody's diverse. So even with the idea that neurodiversity exists in all of us, like ADHD is neurodiversity, autism is neurodiversity, but so is normalcy. Like not everybody is the same. There's no way that I can jump in your brain and view the world in the same lens as you. I can't see the same shade of blue. I know we're looking at the same shade of blue, but I don't know that you fundamentally interpret blue the same way that I do. So, with that being said, I kind of don't believe in normalcy. And I think that's empowered me to feel more comfortable about my lack of normalcy from a traditionalist perspective, so to speak. And I also have, I grew up in a punk rock and sort of alternative counterculture background where I've done probably my best to avoid the status quo as much as possible. But I also think there's systems in society that once you understand them, you can bring that abnormal essence into that normalcy and maybe try and influence change or different perspectives and things like that. So I think, yeah, I think it's kind of, again, just like dangerous to think of an idea of normalcy because even when you think about globalization, how we're becoming more globalized and businesses or are working across, different, continents and stuff, I don't think there is a normalcy. And even as a brand designer, there's no brand message or mission and vision that works for every nationality, every perspective, every political ideal and stuff like that. So people are the same. You can't please everybody, and if you're pleasing everybody, you're kind of not really pleasing anybody 100%.
Absolutely.
And I'm a
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So
Go.
like I'm a firm believer that I think if you have a unique perspective, lean into it, and you're going to find people with that same perspective. And if it's not a negative perspective, if it's a positive perspective, then you influence the world in a positive way. So Normalcy can be a very positive thing because it's inclusive. It adds a layer of consistency that we can all sort of understand and connect to. But I think it's also, if you don't feel normal, it can be hindering because it then starts becoming not inclusive. So I think normal is okay for us to align the same way that, once a science theory goes into, peer review, and then we decide that this is science. There's things in society that we have to agree on, but then anything beyond that, I think, is open to interpretation and kind of open some opportunity for you to maybe inspire people or to challenge them to look at the world in a different perspective.
So this is very interesting, okay? And I'm trying to chew on what you just said and trying to understand this. So again, as you correctly said, normal is very subjective. What is normal to me may not be normal to you, and vice versa, right? Things
Yep.
like that. So in that case, if that is the case, so being inclusive in your society to fit into that society and what the society expects you to do, that's one of the reason why you would want to have therapy and you would want to have medication so that you can go on with your life without causing any sort of hindrance to others and people whom you
Mhm.
love. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah. I think there are things in society that I think we do out of respect for the greater good, if that makes sense. And because as humans, there are traits and things that we all typically desire, right? If you think even of psychology, we have what's the pyramid of needs? Like you have food, shelter, sex, love, that kind of thing, right? So once you meet all those needs for people, then we all kind of have this headroom where the sky's the limit after that. So, if you look at capitalism, most of capitalism isn't really fulfilling the needs of society, it's fulfilling the wants of society. So to me, like the foundation of human experience is those needs or those, yeah, those needs that we all have. We need to be fed, we need shelter and all that kind of stuff. We need to feel loved and respected. So I think in any community, any society, any continent, any country, any province, any state, whatever, I think that so long as you're respecting the rights to others, meeting those basic needs, then you've achieved that sort of that group um, reality, I guess. And then anything beyond that, to me, is ego. It's the id. So I'm big into psychology, and if any brand designers on the call are kind of like into the Jungian principles of archetypes and stuff, I fundamentally believe those play a part in the roles in society, and I think all of those archetypes are the extension of our ego, and then the core foundational needs are the things we need to respect in society. So I guess that's kind of like the way that I see it, is that everything else is subjective and it's all your tribes. And then the foundational elements of life and human experience are the things that, are family, love, food, shelter, that kind of thing. And the rest is like what makes life fun, I guess. And the rest is to sort of feed your soul. So that's kind of the way I see it, is like normalcy is respecting human experience at a foundational level. And then anything else beyond that is open to interpretation, if that makes
Absolutely,
sense.
absolutely. So I'm gonna go in terms of your mantra. Okay, I see, I have saw this on your LinkedIn profile.
Mhm,
You have mentioned different is beautiful. Okay, I'm gonna use the same
mhm.
analogy here. Okay, so if you believe in this mantra where different is beautiful, okay, and people who are actually like misfits, who are different, okay, but they're beautiful in
Yep.
their own unique way. If the society would have just accepted you for being different and considered this to be respectful, as you said, for the greater good. Okay,
Mhm.
being different is beautiful for the greater good. It's okay to accept them just the way they are. Then it should be fine, right? So in that case, you don't need medication, right? You don't need to do all that therapy. If people would have just accepted things just the way it is, wouldn't that be okay? I mean, would you do medication uh, unless and until you felt the need to be inclusive? If you get what I'm trying to ask you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great question because absolutely, if I found it easier to manage my happiness in the society we reside, I wouldn't take medication fundamentally. And I think so. I definitely have a history of addiction in my past. In high school, I chose some pretty not positive paths for myself, and I did that because I was trying to fit in. And when I used these substances, they made me feel better about myself and they made me navigate the world in a more happy and peaceful way. I didn't do them because I was a party animal or anything like that. And obviously, there's the byproduct of once you do a substance, it changes your mood and you act differently. But I was doing them because I had a curiosity about drugs and I started experimenting with them. And then once I started experimenting with drugs that remove these negative feelings, I started using them as a crutch to navigate the world. But then that just alienated me more and made me feel worse. And eventually I was addicted to them. And, I had to go to therapy. And that's when I got my diagnosis and stuff. So it's kind of bizarre how, like, serendipitously, this all sort of led to my path of discovering who I was. It's almost like I had to make these mistakes on my own to figure these things out. That being said, I wouldn't wish that path on anybody because it removed years of my life where I could have just been blissfully, enjoying time with friends and family. So for sure, like I think if society was more accepting of the lack of normalcy or what we see as normalcy, and more open to different perspectives, I think that more people would feel comfortable in more environments, I guess. And even just coming from the corporate world and working in branding, even like you see a lot of campaigns where like mental health is like the core of it, but then you start a job somewhere and you're like, where are all these disabled people? Like, where are they? So it's like, I don't know. I don't think that we should use communications and themes and stuff to like champion and like pretend like we have this inclusive world. I think the world should just be naturally inclusive, and then for sure, I think we'd find less mental health issues and less struggles. And if we took more of a community spirit approach to the world, maybe even going back a bit. I don't mean in technology, but in social norms. Um, just like coming from a Portuguese family as well, like the like kids live with the Portuguese family until they're like 30 and married, and it's like not even a problem. Like nobody's like, oh, you don't have a job, you're not a doctor yet, and it's like that's what's healthier: going to school and getting debt and doing all that stuff when you're young and don't know, or staying with your family and just like enjoying life. So like it's weird sometimes the things that we look at as normal and the pressures that we put on people in society. And then it's also kind of bizarre to just be like, why aren't these things normal? Like family should be normal and it shouldn't be weird if you want to live at home and that's like the normal for you or whatever. So I think it's just super interesting, even the notion of normal, because it's really hard to put your finger on what normal is, especially in this new digital global world that we reside. So
So true, Jared. I'm gonna take your example, okay? What you said just a while back. You said that when you were experiencing hyper focus, okay, you were
mhm,
able to focus on that specific task and do it to the optimum. In fact, go
yep,
even beyond. Like at that very few seconds, or maybe those few days, you extremely had like a Superman like superpower to learn about that specific activity which you were doing. Okay, but at the same
mhm,
time, you were unable to do what other people were able to do. Like, maybe mediocre task at home, maybe doing errands, maybe doing just normal stuff, which people do in their lives. So, if the society would have been more inclusive and more acceptable. Okay, and let's say if I was there, okay, noticing this, okay, and then if my response was, oh, he's in hyper focus mode, he would not be able to do, those other tasks, and it's all right.
mhm,
If I had that approach, and if I were looking things in that lens, then I don't think there would be so much pressure for you to be on medication, to do therapy, because then I'm being accepted. And this is something which you also said, right? If we would have been more
mhm,
inclusive and just being accepted in regards to the condition which you have, and it's okay,
mhm,
and we don't think of it as something unusual, we just embrace as something beautiful, because I think society has created like a one size fit mechanism, according to me, which they feel should apply to each and every individual. And maybe
Mhm.
it's not you who's supposed to change. Maybe it's just the society. What do you think?
I mean, you just nailed my outlook on the world for sure. And I actually talk when I
Good.
talk to my therapist, they agree. They agree. They say, and actually, there's a quote that I like to think about all the time. I can't remember his name now, but he's a philosopher, and he has a famous quote that says, "It's no means of health to be well adjusted to a sick society." And I fundamentally believe that because we have bombs, we have pandemics, we have poverty, we have rising housing costs, we have all these issues that we are faced with every single day, but we're told to put on a smile and leave it all at home, go to work and move on. And to me, that's absolutely bonkers. That is mental health. That's illness. Like when we have to go to work and solve, mundane problems to sell a product or something like that, while there are problems that have persisted for centuries we still have yet to solve. I find it absolutely bizarre that designers and business people can call themselves problem solvers when really what we are is problem creators to solve those problems we create. So like to me it's like if you've solved the problem but created two or three more, then you haven't solved the problem. And like, I love e-commerce. I love branding. I love this digital world we live in where there's tons of opportunity. But there's also this aspect where I'm like, do we really need 30 of the same soda companies, or do we need more people helping with, social and political issues? Do we need more people working with nonprofits and things like that? Our governments remove resources for nonprofits while shipping weapons to countries to combat people that I have no problems with. It's bizarre, So like it's just as a problem solver and somebody that thinks deeply about the world's problems and how we can solve them. It's bizarre that 7 billion people can be working 24 hours a day and we still have these persistent problems because I mean the answer is because those problems being solved don't generate profits. And fundamentally that's something I'm challenged with, and fundamentally I think it's another big reason why I struggle with depression, and then I also struggle with aspects of this industry. So to mitigate that, really I think like working for myself allows me to gravitate to the causes, the people, and sort of like the projects that I think are meaningful to the world and actually sort of like move the needle in a positive direction. But I do absolutely think that like I think we need to reflect more on the norms of society and challenge the ones that seem bizarre. So I think it's totally okay for us to just like have those hard conversations, even when family and friends at Thanksgiving or whatever holiday don't really want to talk about it. But if you never talk about it, then perhaps we never discuss these things and perhaps we never change them. So I think like if you want to be a force for positive change, you absolutely need to reflect on sort of these normalcies and sort of like maybe rethink or reframe them and see like, does this make sense? Am I really a problem solver? What am I doing? And then, just tailor it to what makes you happy and how you can make a meaningful difference, I guess.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree with you. Now, this is interesting, and I'm going to build up on this, what you just said. See, the way I look at things, okay, according to me, different is beautiful, and I kind of resonate with it a lot, and I think all these misfits is what makes the world better. Kind of Steve Jobs
Hmm.
also had the same analogy. These misfits is what actually who changed the world. Now,
Oh yeah.
okay, now see, most of the people in this world are kind of convinced that it's important that we all need to have find your purpose, have clarity in your life, live a normal life. Do you think personally that we spend too much time stressing about figuring everything out instead of simply embracing and living each day as it unfolds? And do you think is this pressure is what's causing all this depression, anxiety, and ADHD because of this pressure?
Yeah, I think it's definitely complex, but there is something to be said uh, for our innate desire to solve problems. And I think, humans have a negative bias, and that's why we are problem solvers. And I think in our world, we can go to the grocery store, most of us in a developed world and stuff like that. You can go to the grocery store, buy an apple. You don't have to worry about food. You don't really have to worry about safety and stuff. So, like I said, in psychology, once those basic needs are kind of met, society starts looking outwardly to like what other challenges and important things to me can I solve, and that's where that subjectivity comes in. And that's why we end up having 30 different soda brands, because we're not trying to solve hunger anymore, because it's not a problem I see anymore. So I think from that perspective, I think like being different is sometimes also kind of like looking outwardly beyond the comforts and the norms that you have, and then understanding whether or not the problems you are solving are worth solving. And then from there, understanding how much effort or where you could put your effort best. And then I guess that's kind of like to go further, I think like we're also burdened by information almost 24/7 now. When I log into LinkedIn or Instagram, I have 12 different perspectives telling me I should do the same thing 12 different ways. And I think that kind of creates this level of confusion of like, what am I doing? Who am I? Which solution is mine? Which path is mine? And ultimately, at the end of the day, everybody just needs shelter, love, food, that kind of thing. So, like, I kind of always go back to that and just like figure out what your basic needs are and your desires. And if your lifestyle merits making money, traveling, and doing all that stuff, and it makes you happy, pursue that. I'm not trying to say that any one way is right or wrong. And I guess that's kind of where this different is beautiful idea comes from. And it's not necessarily even the idea of misfits. The idea of businesses is like, we get these industries that emerge, and then next thing you know, everything becomes the same because everybody's like, well, these people are succeeding, so let's do it that way. And like branding right now, it's like I go on 12 different brand designer accounts and they're sharing the same insights, like, here's how you do brand strategy, it's the 5 pillars, the 5 Ps, or the six that, or this and that. And I'm like, yeah, everybody knows that. If you go to school for brand strategy or you learn it, you're going to learn that, but that's not what makes a brand special. What makes a brand special is how they're different. So like ultimately, like, even I wanted to adopt that for my business because I don't necessarily want to work with companies who want to be the same as the next. If you want to work with me, I kind of want you to understand that I'm unique and I believe you should be unique. So if we're going to work together, let's collaborate to see how you're unique and how that uniqueness translates to value. And then from there, we'll develop something that makes you different and encourages you to be an authentic brand. So that same sort of mentality that I have with human experience, I think translates to business experience. Like we can throw out business to consumer or business to business and like all these industry jargons, but at the end of the day, every business is a business to person. We're all communicating to humans. And I don't care if you're a marketing director in some corporation or you're a consumer that's getting a text message. Whatever communications are out there, whatever brand experience, you want to be able to connect on a human level. And to delight human beings, I think we need to be human. So to me, again, it's just kind of coming back to like fundamentally what makes you authentic, what makes you you, whether it's a business or a person. And then from there, you can actually just like move forward naturally. So like even when I work with companies, they'll come to me and be like, well, how should we be this business? And I'm like, I don't know. How do you want to be this business? And then they're like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, well, then think about that first, because you need to be you need to develop your brand from within. And then from there, we can shape language and visuals and all that stuff around that. But fundamentally, if it doesn't feel authentic to you and your company and your company culture, then it's going to be really hard to manage that brand to act authentically. And that's where you get like marketing jargon and a lot of copywriting and stuff, because at this point, they're just kind of following the rule books. They're not really behaving authentically. So I guess that mantra, different is beautiful. It's not just about like being a misfit. It's also about like, there are also differences in the normalcies, because even corporations who do follow like pretty rigid culture structures still have different points of views and values. And, like those owners started their own business because they thought they could do it differently than the next. So like, why would you want a brand that's the same, or why would you want to act the same? So that's kind of like where it came from. And it's just the idea that everybody's neurodiverse, everybody's diverse, and we're all different. So I think like we need to be that as, businesses, as organizations, as communities,
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Okay, all right, Jared. I'll be very upfront. Okay, you didn't answer my question. Okay, but we
Oh,
understood. We understood why different is beautiful and your take on it. Okay, and I
sorry.
appreciate. That's
What was the
okay.
question again?
That's all right. That's all right. How about we take a break? Okay, let's take a break, guys. I have a few announcements which I would like to make, and then we will head back to this discussion about how to manage depression. So this episode is about mental health. So we know we would try to shift our focus from branding, marketing, and we will try to bring it back to mental health and educate more creative people, how to go about things. Okay, so I'll be quickly, I'll play some, audio, and we will take a quick break. People, I want to let you know that, in case if you have not followed my podcast, okay, please click on the three dots if you are on LinkedIn. It go under event details, and you should be able to find links to my podcast for Spotify, Apple. I've also written a few articles about podcasting on LinkedIn. Do check them out. If you do get benefit out of it, give me a shout out. I think that would be really cool. When you do check out some of the previous episodes, do follow me, rate and review. Those feedbacks do really help me to make the show better. I also want to let you know that we have come up with a merch store. So I have done a small partnership with Printify, and I'm actually designing a few merch for each of my guests as we progress with each episode every week. So for this specific episode, I have some mental health matters merch. I have these links under the show description, and even under the event comments. You should be able to find some of those links. I would like to encourage you to check out some of those merch, and if you like it, do order it. I'm not really sure what is the quality, but I have tried opting in for the best ones. Do order a few items. What I'm trying to do is come up with like a revenue share model, wherein I would do like I will share the revenue which I get from these merch with my guests for that specific themes. So I mean, it's a work in progress. So hopefully you will like it. So check those things out. I really appreciate your love and support. And if you're still listening to this conversation live, do invite a few other friends, because we would be dissecting this conversation further. So let's actually get into this. Okay, so Jared, thank you so much for your patience. Okay, now back again to my question. Okay, so see what I have noticed. Okay, and the reason, let's keep the different is beautiful thing aside for a second. Okay, what I have
Yep.
noticed that there is a lot of pressure, okay, from people in this world, because every marketer, every strategist, every designer, anybody I have spoken to who runs and manages a business or help others to run and manage their business, they all talk about this thing: find your why, find your purpose, find your clarity. And that's how it's
Mhm.
supposed to happen. Now, do you personally think that we are stressing so much to a point, trying to figure it out, that is really affecting our mental health? That's one of the reason why stress is happening, anxiety is happening, because according to them, this is how you're supposed to do it. Okay, now if you don't have your why in place, you're no good. Okay, that does not work.
Yeah.
That's what my question is. If you get what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something I grapple with myself. I am one of those people that is seeking purpose all the time, but I think that's also because I like have a very philosophical and existential brain. And I also just like, I study philosophy a lot, just like out of my own self interest and um, in an interest of understanding the world more deeply. And I guess for me, I guess this search for purpose, I think for myself, is because I haven't, in my opinion, or how I feel, found like happiness. You know what I mean? Like that makes me sound like really like a sad sack. I'm actually a really humorous person, and like I enjoy life, and I enjoy the finer things in life. But all of my life, I've felt this kind of like recurring feeling of just like something's not right. And I think my search for purpose translates into seeking knowledge. And then through that, you make discoveries and you're like, wow, I don't understand anything. And then that kind of translates back to seeking purpose. And I think that's probably the cycle for most people when they're like searching for their like why or their happiness, I guess. And it's good to have a compass. Like, I mean, like if you're in the woods and you need to eat, like you don't want to just wander aimlessly in a direction because you're probably not going to exit the woods. So like it's important to understand that you have a guiding point in life. And for me, I try to relate that back to my like personal values and ethics. And a lot of therapists will say like your ethics and like the way you were raised and the values that you have actually have a really important impact on where you should be in life and the things you should do. And I think your like personal values are kind of your compass. And I like to say compass instead of purpose because I don't know if any of us truly have a purpose. Like we're all just humans. And to think that one of us has any individual purpose over another, it's kind of bizarre. And I think, like, obviously, in our world where there's a bazillion opportunities and jobs and things we can do, it's hard to know what a purpose is because, you know, it's kind of like,
I think, Jared,
um,
most people, and I hate to interrupt you back there, I think most people,
no,
when
no,
you
of
speak
course.
about purpose, I think they consider, I think they are thinking in terms of work. Like, what is your purpose in terms of work and what you want to achieve out of that work? Maybe it's a business,
Uh,
maybe it's a career.
But
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what I mean is like there's a wealth of opportunity. Anybody could wake up tomorrow, sign up for a Shopify account or something, and just start any business. Like so like it's hard to know what the choice that's going to lead you to happiness is. And I think that's what happens is there's something called choice paralysis. And it's something I actually use a lot when I'm thinking about UX and like UX design and even just like designing my life is when you have too many considerations, sometimes you just don't want to do anything because when you choose one of those, you're going to reflect back on maybe one of those other choices was the right one. And that's kind of what I say is like, I think we all have these foundational needs and everything else is subjective. So that purpose, I think, is just like our ego driving us to find this like fictional thing that's going to bring us happiness. And it kind of goes back to what you said earlier is maybe if we all start kind of like searching for purpose, that is the true purpose is like maybe we find the meaning and stopping searching and just enjoying the time we have. So yeah, I think like maybe we do spend too much time seeking purpose. And I think, you know, us brand designers are maybe a little bit responsible for that. In some kind of, you know, like it at the end of the day, it's my job to make social posts and stuff that encourage people to buy this product that's going to make them more happy, right? So like that is something I've struggled with in the last few years because especially now that we've gone more remote and more digital, you can't log into somewhere where somebody's trying to convince you their way is better. And that obviously is going to influence a lot of people, especially if you're seeking purpose and you if you don't feel confident with your own purpose or your place in the world. Of course you are going to click more links to try and find that purpose. And then even when you think about consumerism, a lot of purchasing is so that we can create that purpose. Like my house is styled a certain way and I have a certain couch and I listen to certain music and that's my purpose. I am this person, right? So I think if we all just kind of like take the world more as sort of like an adventure, or we treat our life here as sort of passing through. I'm not really a religious person. I'm semi-spiritual, but a lot of that language is kind of in relationship to a lot of religious beliefs. But you know, like we don't own the world. I think we're just residing on this planet that we just so happen to luckily be built in or created, however you believe that came about. But you know, like we don't own the world. The world is here for us to enjoy. And I think like, you know, I think we just need to take a step back and realize that, you know, not our purpose is not going to make the world better. It's our combined purpose.
uh,
You know, it's our combined purpose and efforts that's really going to change the world. And I think that's fundamentally it. And like obviously we all have our subjective needs and like we all like certain music and stuff, but like if we focus too much on that, I think it does burden you with more negative thoughts. And like even growing up in counterculture, like when I was younger, I didn't listen to other music because my friends would make fun of me. And you know, if it wasn't death metal, it was like, oh, that's not cool music, what's this, you know? And as I got older, I felt alienated by my own walls that I was putting up for myself. So for sure, I think that like, you know, focusing too much on purpose and like having one answer in life can be a bad thing. But I do think we all need to have some kind of moral compass or something that guides us. And then from there, I think like, you know, be open to experiences and be open to new challenges or different perspectives and stuff. And again, like
mhm.
I am the first person to quit a job that doesn't work for me and try something new. I've been an audio engineer. I've done construction. I've been a painter. I've, you know, been a designer. I've owned my own studio. I've done all kinds of different things. And that's because I don't think like I just have one purpose. I'm like, I'm doing this for now and it's making me happy. But once it doesn't serve me and I don't think I have anything further to contribute, I try something else. And that's how I find purpose in a sense. But it's again, I don't think there's a fundamental purpose. My
Absolutely.
purpose on this planet is not to draw logos, it's definitely to make human experience for myself and others better, I think.
Absolutely. You know, I love that authenticity and what you just shared. I think when you say compass, according to me, it's more, and I feel the compass which you're referring to is just having a clarity on where you're heading, right?
Yeah.
And is it, according to me, and from what you have said, I gauge and I understand, and I kind of believe the same thing that it's possible to live a purposeful life by not having too much of clarity. Maybe a little bit of clarity is okay, but you don't need to be
Mhm.
exceptionally good. Like if you have to drive from New York to California, all you need is just see like 30 meters what is ahead, if it's
Mhm.
night, right? And you can still navigate and ensure that you can drive all the way to California with that kind of range. So a little bit of clarity is good enough. So that is really profound. That makes a lot of sense. Now at some
Yep.
point you do come across individuals, friends, family members, and when you tell them, okay, because when you said that, I've been a plumber, I've been doing this, I've been doing that, it's like a lot of things. When people look at your career in terms of your resume, they see all these things which you have tried and tested. So
Mhm.
when somebody asks you, Jared, don't you know what you're doing? Like, why is that you don't have clarity? I think that also puts a lot of pressure to you as an individual because you want to make sure you don't look stupid, right?
I guess for me, my perspective, my entire career has not to become employable though. And I think that's a big thing is like, you know, everybody wants to fill their resume with things that are going to lead to the next. But I'm like, what if you hate your career? Like, so to me, I'm like, my resume is not to get employed. It's to show that I'm curious, that I'm willing to do hard work. I'm willing to challenge myself. To me, if I look at my resume and I'm like, wow, you did a lot of things, it's like, well, yeah, because when I was in a bad situation, I had the courage to put myself into a new situation. So like even in job interviews, you can just reframe things. And like some people be like, oh, well, what are you, a job hopper? And I'm like, yeah, what do you like? Do you not have the confidence to know what you want out of life? Like I could throw that back at them and just be like, maybe
That's a
you're the
good
one
one,
with the
bro.
lack of
That is a
clarity.
really good one.
So I feel confident in my own outlook in life to be able to really challenge people on their own beliefs. And to be honest, I'm like, I kind of think of myself as not a great employee, but anytime I've been an employee and I've been that challenging person, managers and stuff have always respected it because they're like, you know what, I never really thought about it that way. And like, you are fundamentally trying to make us better because we're all challenging each other in candid and respectful ways. But at the end of the day, like, you're right. It's like it's challenging to like find a new job or like quit a job with no blanket or whatever, but it's also challenging to spend 10 years in a job you hate. So like it's really up to me. Like to me, it's like it's up to you to determine which hard work you're willing to do. And that to
Absolutely.
me is like, ultimately, I'm a hard worker. I think I'm smart and knowledgeable. So it doesn't matter how long I stayed at a job. It doesn't matter how many jobs I've had. It doesn't matter what type of jobs I've done. What matters is that every single time I've done it to the best of my abilities with curiosity and with compassion, empathy. And when I feel like I don't contribute to a situation, it's also positive to remove yourself from an environment where you think the other people will thrive without you. So that's another thing too, is like if a job's questioning your track record, you kind of just put it in terms that make sense. And if they don't like that, it's probably a blessing because maybe you wouldn't thrive in that environment anyways. So like ultimately authenticity is never going to be a bad thing. Like yes, in the interim, like if you get a rejection, it's kind of crappy, but that rejection may be the best thing that happens to you, you know? Like so if you like go in blindly to a job and like you ignore red flags and stuff, then you could deal with an entire year of your life of misery. So it's like I would rather just make quick choices. And like any CEO is going to say like fuck up and fuck up fast, right? So like learn from your mistakes. So why can't I do that in my life? And if a manager or a boss is going to encourage making mistakes and learning from those, I think that should be encouraged in people's careers, lives, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm always just very honest and sort of open to my past and why I've made certain decisions. And generally, it puts me in more authentic situations. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. I love this. I really love the way how we are having this conversation back and forth because I'm also learning simultaneously from what you're sharing, and the authenticity part. It really stands out, man. I think that is super, super cool. I admire you for your being authentic and for doing what you feel is right for you. In a way, I feel you're like a professional risk taker. You keep jumping from one place to another. Most people might, spend their entire life in that one job and they stick around it, not being able to take that risk of hopping from one after another. So that is super cool. Now let's actually get into
but
the solution
that's
side. Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. Finish.
I was just gonna say that's a risk too, though, because 15 years later, you may look back on your 15 years and be like, "Wow, I wasted a lot of time." So that's a risk too. Like, and that's the thing is, I think people don't really reframe situations, or they don't try and look at everything in multiple perspectives to really like understand that everything in life is challenging, and it's just what you're willing to challenge yourself with.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now I want to actually get into the solution side of things because
Mhm.
I think our conversation is linked to first identifying what it is and then coming up, what solutions worked out for you and how did you deal it. So I have a two-part question. The first part of this question is for creative individuals. I don't know how depression would affect a creative individual. Maybe you can highlight on that. What strategies maybe you would suggest for creative individuals just to identify what is the trouble and maybe how to go about addressing it, and if there is any sort of solution which has worked out for you, maybe therapy activities or anything you found easy and helpful to manage your depression, ADHD, or overall mental health, please suggest that.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, there's loads of different things that people can do. I think, coming to terms with your authentically with your own abilities and your desires. I always use this like example that like as a designer, there's a point in your career where your skill set doesn't match your taste. So you like keep putting out projects and you're like, how can it's just missing that 20%. And then there's a point in your career where you're like, oh, I'm nailing it. And now every time I have a vision, it's coming to fruition. And I think there's like mental health is a practice the same way that anything else is. And you got to figure out what works for yourself. So the first thing I would do is if you are struggling, go speak to a professional. That's like the biggest thing because like thinking never solves a problem, like acting solves a problem. And these people have already read books on people thinking about these subjects. So the thinking's all been done for you. So stop thinking about it and go help yourself sooner than later. Because burnout is no joke. And I've spent 4 or 5 years combating the symptoms of my burnout and rehabilitating myself into some sense of normalcy. So, like, the sooner you seek help, the better off you'll be because mental health, like, your brain rewires itself when you get into patterns of thought, and those patterns of thought become more ingrained in your mind the more you let them persist. So talk to a professional all the time because they're going to fast track your understanding of what you're dealing with. And understanding, as we've talked about, is the first step. So once you understand, then from there, I think it's just like experience and like trying different things. So like I've done everything. I've had the different apps like Calm and like the meditation apps and things like that. I don't necessarily benefit that much from meditation, although I do try and spend 15 minutes in the morning or something trying to like not look at my phone, maybe draw a little bit, practice a little bit of mindfulness. Um, Journaling is something that I know works pretty well for people, but I would say, understand journaling thoroughly because there's 7 or 9 different philosophies to journaling, and some of them can work better for others. So with journaling, for instance, you can use reframing, which is, for example, something happens to you that creates negative feelings during the day, and then at night you're ruminating on those ideas. Well, if you reframe those ideas and write that down in a journal, you can look at what you were thinking of the situation, and then you can reframe it into a more positive way. So like to me, I'm like, I wasted 10 years of my life being a drug addict, but at the end of the day, I don't think I wasted 10 years being a drug addict. I think I was a drug addict for 10 years so that I could discover I was challenged with mental illness, so that I could discover that I needed certain things out of myself and my family and my support networks and my career. So like all of that struggle along the way is what put me in this position. So, like, reframing thinking can be a really positive tool. And then the more you reframe and practice positive patterns of thought, you'll develop new connections in your brain that are naturally going to gravitate towards positive thought patterns. So, like, there's cognitive behavioral therapy. That's like the big thing that a lot of therapists will kind of gravitate to, and that's kind of just like really just reframing a lot of things in your life and just trying to put a positive spin on it. So instead of focusing on the problems, you focus on solutions and then try and act on those solutions.
I have an interesting question,
Um,
Jared. Okay, while you
yeah,
stated
yep.
that, it's not necessary, right, to seek therapy and do all these things, without not having a diagnosis. Let's assume that you're a perfectly normal individual doing, going on with your life, and you experience burnout. Is it okay to reach a therapist and ask for help and doing these things, or would that be weird?
No, absolutely. Yeah. Like that's what they're there for. I mean, a therapist doesn't necessarily need to be somebody you actively go to.
And it does
You
not
can even
even
just
mean
read.
that you have some diagnosis. I'm just trying to understand that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there is a differentiation between depression and clinical depression. Clinical depression, so I have persistent depression. That means probably for the rest of my life, I'm going to go through depressed periods. I take medication every day to mitigate that. And then my anxiety as well, it's persistent, it's acute. So I take medication because physically speaking, when I encounter challenging situations, my body loses control and it thinks there's a tiger chasing me, and my heart goes up, I breathe, I cry, I lose control. So that's just something I'm going to have to navigate. That being said, if you go through loss and you're dealing with some kind of trauma, it's possible that you go through a depressive period, but it's not clinical. So that's why you need to seek help early, because a depressive period can formulate into a clinical diagnosis. And that's what you want to avoid, because nobody wants to be clinically depressed. Sometimes it's hereditary and you just need to deal with it. So that being said, yes, like a lot of people will have depressed periods in their lives, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's something they have to deal with for the rest of their lives. And that's why I think it is important to contact, a therapist, because they'll help you determine whether it's something you can, get through, or if it's something that you need to manage for the rest of your life. And then on top of that, like I wasn't aware that my anxiety was actually from my ADHD, like my inattentive ADHD. So as soon as I started taking ADHD medication, my brain was 100% quieter and I was just happier and I was able to work more effectively. So like I think understanding, like, it's not okay to be like, I'm depressed, I'll get over it. So like just figure it out, and then from there you can figure out what you need to do next. So yeah, not everybody who feels depressed is going to end up with a clinical diagnosis, and that's something that's important to understand as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Jared, at any point of time while you're taking these medications, does your therapist encourage you to reduce down the the consumption, so that, because I've noticed the pattern that once you have medication for a prolonged period of time, your body gets so used to it, right, that without
Mhm.
it things don't seem to work. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so it
Like a
again, it really
dependency thing,
depends
like a
on.
dependency thing, if you get my question.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so SSRI, so I'm gonna get super technical, but like SSRIs are the main non-narcotic drug that they'll usually diagnose for like anxiety and depression. And those have no narcotic effect, but you do need to wean off them. That being said, if you feel better and your doctor says like it seems like you're not clinically depressed anymore, what they'll do is they'll wean you off the medication. So you basically just start taking lower and lower doses, and there's lots of people that rehabilitate back to just normal lifestyles and don't deal with those clinical symptoms. So it just really depends on the person. It really depends on your heritage. There's so many different factors. So there's not really one thing. And I am not a psychologist or a psychotherapist or anything. So like everything I'm saying, please take with a grain of salt. And it's all just through my experience and my learnings. But I think like not being on medication is always going to be the best solution for anybody. But that being said, there are people that need it. Like if I don't take my ADHD medication, I am 1,000 times more depressed. And it's not that I need the medication, it's that I needed the medication before. So I was always depressed before, and my brain was crazy busy, and I would ruminate on these really dark thoughts. And now that I take my medication, the noise in my brain is quieter, which means I can pick up on the thoughts that I have and I can focus on them and act on them. So for me, it is actually a healthier thing to take medication every day. And it's probably something I'll have to take for the rest of my life because ADHD is a neurodiversity thing. So it's just like my brain is built differently. And to, again, back to earlier in our conversation, to sort of conform to some of these more normal societal situations, I have an easier experience when my brain is quieter and I'm more focused. So the pros of taking the medication outweigh the negatives. So I do it. But that being said, if I started feeling better and I didn't feel like I needed medication or help and I was feeling better, I definitely would speak with my doctor to reduce. I don't think drugs are something we should take just for the sake of it. I think there's something that they can either guide or aid us in a difficult time, or I mean, we could talk about the social aspect of drugs and my political beliefs on that, but I won't get into it. But I fundamentally think drugs are a positive thing, whether recreational or not. Uh, so long as people understand their effectiveness, where they should be used, and how to not succumb to the negatives of them.
That's so cool, man. I really love what you have shared. Thank you so much for bringing me clarity, not giving me
My
clarity,
pleasure.
and my listeners some clarity. Now, see, looking ahead, okay? Looking ahead with your life,
Mhm.
what aspirations and goals you have for the future, personally, professionally, and how do you plan to continue inspiring yourself and others with your journey?
Yeah, so I mean, it's definitely the last couple of years I've done a lot of self discovery and reflection, and I mean, I started my career creating my own company, and I really enjoyed it. And then I lost my way for a little bit and tried a few different things. And I definitely have circled back to, I think I just want to really work for myself and build a company that I'm proud of. So I think moving forward, I'm probably going to throw myself more into that. I think right now I'm still kind of on this like discovery journey to figure out like where I want to niche and stuff like that. I think I've been a generalist for most of my career, and I think I want to focus more on helping a specific niche group of businesses, whether that be in like a social aspect of business or the environmental aspect. So I have strong ethics and values that lean towards certain industries. And I think moving forward, I'm going to try and find ways to connect with businesses like that so that I can find more meaningful work, I guess, meaningful to me, anyways. And then other than that, I think I'm also going to, try and find a healthier relationship with work and step back from my career a little bit more. I think I've thrown myself into learning and developing my skills to a point where I feel really confident and like secure in where I am as a creative. And I think I can, take a little bit more of my spare time back and use that time to find, passion and love for a lot of the things I used to like music and skateboarding and all kinds of different things. So yeah, I think I'm definitely gonna try and find a healthier relationship with my work and continue to just like love branding.
Absolutely. I want to give the audience, the listeners in the listening lounge, the opportunity to come up and ask Jared some questions. If anybody is interested, please raise your hand. I would be happy to bring you up. And while we are waiting for people to show up, if they like to come, they can. I want to ask you about
Mhm.
when you filled the intake form, I had specifically a question which I kind of ask all my guests. Okay, now, who has been your biggest influence and inspiration? Now, you highlighted a lot of things there. Your mom, you briefly spoke about your mom, your father, stepfather,
Mhm.
mental health. Stephen Seigmeister, I think, is the Australian graphic designer, punk rock. But you also mentioned addiction.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to actually emphasize on
Yeah.
that. So, would you mind telling me how addiction has been your biggest influence or inspiration?
That's an interesting one because it I mean, I have a unique relationship with drugs, and I personally think like politically we could reform the system, and I don't think drugs are inherently a harmful thing. I think, healers have used substances for centuries to bring peace and healing to communities. So I think, my curiosity for drugs started as like this intellectual curiosity. I thought they were interesting and how they could shape your brain and create these openings into realms of thought you wouldn't otherwise consider. And then obviously, the more you use substances, they can wrap their gnarly little fingers around your life. So, but that being said, I think like my curiosity was only fueled by using substances, and in the positive moments and those enlightening moments where they opened my eyes to different perspectives and stuff, I think that was a fundamental aspect in shaping who I am today, the way I think, my empathy. Um, and then there's also an aspect to drug addiction where you reside in this world that a lot of people are not privy to. So I've met a lot of interesting people with very interesting and unique perspectives who have way more like sense of purpose or knowledge of self, even though society would have deemed them, unsavory. So through my relationship with drugs, I've actually met a lot of interesting people who society would look at negatively, who have actually inspired me more positively than a lot of like normal, and I'm using air quotes, normal people. Because like, the average business person with a suit is no better than, somebody living in the streets. And in some cases, they may even be shadier and more corrupt and more exploitative than, somebody who really just wants to be left alone and at peace in the world and stuff. So I think like addiction and substance use opened my perspectives and created more empathy and compassion for the things in the world that we often overlook, I guess, or don't really necessarily want to dive into. And I think that's, created this level of empathy that really gives me a unique perspective as a creative. So
That's so cool, my friend. That is really, really cool. I want to actually welcome somebody on stage. Izzy, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate this so much. And do you have a question? Would you like to contribute, or would you like to simply say hi to Jared?
I mean, of course, I want to say hi to everyone. um, but I wanted to say that, I mean, or maybe to add to the conversation, because Jared and I have worked together in the past, and he was a speaker at one of our events at the Ottawa Design Club. And Jared was so vulnerable with the crowd, and we've had so much feedback from the community saying, wow, I finally felt seen. So, first of all, I want to say thank you, Jared, for sharing your story, because it's making people, it's just making people feel good. Because sometimes when you're feeling like that, you feel so alone and you think that you're the only one that's going through the things that you're going through. And yet you're here sharing your story, making sure that, you're not alone, that there is a way to see on the other side of that wall. And so I want to thank you for that.
yeah,
On
no, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go, please.
No, I was just gonna say I appreciate that, and that's honestly why I try to be as authentic as possible. Because I think, like, I've said this a couple times in the conversation, but things we see as negative often aren't negative. Like, it's okay to have these conversations and to talk about mental health in an authentic way because, like you said, we're all
Absolutely.
human and we're all kind of going through the same thing. So it just brings us closer
Mhm.
together.
Absolutely. And we also work like most of the time. I mean, maybe I'm talking for myself here, but alone in front of a screen, and we don't connect to a lot of people. That's just the nature of a brand designer's like way of
100%. Yeah.
yes, yeah,
Yep.
exactly. But I actually wanted to ask you a question because I see Virginia is in the crowd, and
Hmm.
she told me that before you came on stage, that you were maybe regretting your decision of going on stage. So I'd like for you to maybe elaborate on that.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, there's a few factors. So, I was, it was a challenging and very busy week where I had a huge workload and I was working on a report, I was working on a few projects, and some of them were becoming more bloated than others. And I had been working like 12, 16-hour days, and it was pretty stressful. So, even that day, like, I was literally working to like the very last minute and kind of had to tell my client, like, I literally need to go do this talk. And then I had some things in my presentation that were maybe a little bit more vulnerable. And my father surprisingly showed up to the talk. So I had a panic attack before coming to the talk. And to be honest, I was like crying and having like a rough time to the point where I had almost like wanted to bail. And then once I got there, my father showed up and I was like, this is a disaster. But you kindly let me into the room to edit my slides, and after a while, it all kind of cleared up. But that's the nature of invisible disabilities. Is that, like, nobody that watched me on stage knew that an hour before I talked, I was like in tears, hyperventilating, crying, and thinking everything was falling apart, and that I was not, like, it was a bad situation, and nobody really even knew that. But I think there's probably lots of people right now that are experiencing that same kind of thing. So yeah, it's challenging because a lot of people can just look at you and be like, "Well, you work hard and you're successful, and why are you sad?" And I'm like, "Well, you don't really get it. That's why."
And that's precisely why I wanted you to touch on that, because when we looked at you giving that presentation, and by the way, we have this recorded, I can share the link with Jason for people to go
Please do.
and watch it. And it is great. Or actually, yeah, you have it on your LinkedIn profile as well. Um, but it doesn't show. Like, you're such a
Yeah.
professional, and you were able to compose yourself right before, and you delivered like the master amazing person that you are. So
I
I want to
appreciate that.
congratulate you on that as well.
Thank you.
Sadly, I have to bounce because I have a meeting to go to, but I wanted to make sure I said hi and just again saying thank you for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you for the kind words, and it's always a pleasure to say it.
Thank you, Izzy. Thank you, Izzy. You're welcome to post that link under the event comments so that more people can see it. And we'll go from there. I want to welcome Wade. Thank you so much for your patience. Do you have a question, my friend, for Jared? Or would you like to contribute or simply say hi? Okay, I'm not really sure if Wade can hear us. Wade, please unmute if you can hear us.
Well, looks like
Okay.
you dropped out.
Oh. All right. Okay, so I'll wait for a few minutes. Wade might just come back. I'm
Oh,
not.
there he is
Okay.
again.
Okay. There is. Let's bring Wade back again. LinkedIn giving us troubles. Wait, let's unmute. Wade, can you hear us? No signal still. All right.
There we
There we
go.
go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, of course, my friend. How
Yeah,
are you?
wasn't
So nice to
unmuting.
see you.
I'm very good, thank
Yeah,
you.
not see you, but nice to see you or meet you
Yeah.
virtually on
He's
LinkedIn.
here.
Yeah, he's here. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Jared, it was an absolute pleasure listening to your
Thank you.
podcast today. Very insightful. Coming from down here, I'm down in Niagara, Ontario, and I
Cool.
used to be part of a mental health clinic down here. And everything that you said today was absolutely spot on. I highly recommend anybody that is going through any issues to seek out help, whether you have a clinical diagnosis or not. There is lots of different programs that are out there. Different ones work differently for different people. But I know there is a number that are very highly successful, and I had seen that in our practice at the clinic. And yeah, so that's about all I can really say.
No, it's great. Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, like, I think even like when I was diagnosed 20 years ago with anxiety, like the research and tools that we have access to now are like tenfold now. So the amount of therapies that you can explore or try are, there's a multitude of them and they all work on different things or for different people and stuff. So yeah, Wade, I couldn't agree more. Like, definitely get a professional's advice. If you feel like it's something you're just struggling to get out of, because everybody deals with depression. Like, we're all going to go through loss and stuff, and sometimes we get out of it, and those times that we don't, we just need to seek help. And I don't think you need to feel ashamed or anything like that. I think you should feel more ashamed if you just like burden yourself with carrying that load by yourself. So
Absolutely. So in fact, I'm not even going to mention any different programs, but they're for people to understand these programs that are out there aren't just for people that are suffering through like depression, anxiety, and so forth. There's programs that are out there that, executives, elite sports athletes are all taking because it puts them up on a higher level of their competition. It gets them on their A game and helps them. Those that are suffering from different issues that are on medications, there's a number of them that are out there that once you finish completing the programs, now you always go back and do a refresher every once in a while. But a lot of them will help you dramatically get off the medications as well.
yep. Yeah. I mean, medication is not fun. I'll definitely admit that. It's not necessarily something I think you want to deal with, but they are a tool that are definitely valuable to either helping you cross a hurdle, or it may be something that you need for management. So yeah, I agree.
That's awesome. Wade,
Fantastic.
I have a question for you, Wade, but hold on.
Sure.
I have a question for you. Okay, I want to first of all acknowledge Vanya, who is down in the audience, and Heather, who is down in the audience, Mike. These individuals do come to my show regularly. And as Derek says, thank you so much to all the other 200 listeners listening to us on LinkedIn. And, Derek, if you get the joke from our episode. So thank you so much for your love and support. So the question which I have for you, Wade, is that did you experience depression or any mental health issues personally? Is that the reason why you're supporting them from your end?
On my end, as far as I've suffered from ADHD my entire life, wasn't diagnosed with it till I'd say roughly about 7 years ago. And I'm still and that was just with my GP doing, the different self-examinations and so forth. And I now have a new GP, and he wants me to get a reassessment just to be more thorough. Trying to get in touch with a psychologist for adults down in this area is like pulling a tooth because they don't want to deal with adults. They want to. They don't get paid on doing adults unless you've got a really good insurance program. Unfortunately,
That is unfortunate.
yeah. That aside, as far as down here in Niagara, we had the highest suicide rate in the country per population, and third highest in North America. So
Wow, I
that's
didn't
when
know
so that's why we started up this organization roughly about 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago. I'm no longer part of the organization, but it was something that was badly needed, and I saw so much help that was being done. In fact, during COVID, we were the only clinic in the Niagara region that was open to helping people, where everywhere else was completely closed. So quite proud of that as well. But yeah, no. So as far as that's how I really got involved with it all, because I really knew nothing about mental health issues and so forth. And in deciding that we need to do something about it, I just started doing research and connecting with people, and we made some stuff happen.
That's really interesting. And it kind of like leads me to another subject that we didn't really cover is that by talking about these subjects authentically, it encourages society to start, developing programs and considering these things more seriously. And like, right now there's a big narrative, or I guess there's two schools of thought with like the neurodivergence, and it's like, well, everybody has ADHD now, and it's like, yeah, because that's how science works. Like when we learn new things, we adapt definitions, and then we try and resolve foundational support systems for these new findings. So I think like right now there's so many resources, and that's probably why you're seeing a lot of people being diagnosed late with ADHD because, like Wade said, there wasn't really any. Like people thought that as you grow older, like you just grew out of ADHD, but then you end up as an adult just feeling like you get this low self-esteem and just feeling like you're a loser because your brain's crazy and you can't like perform like other people and stuff, and then that really like hinders your ability to like perform in society. So like part of my talking authentically about these things too is just like stop feeling ashamed. Like go talk to somebody. Like do the research. You can go online and read a bunch of blogs about all the new ADHD research or neurodiversity research and stuff like that, and then you can start stumbling onto different resources and stuff, and just like information and understanding. And even if you don't suffer with these things, it's good to understand them because not even you probably have at least one person in your direct family that's suffering with something that's similar. So even just by knowing and understanding these things, you can help people around you and just like, be a better citizen or community member, I guess.
Spot on, spot on. And there's so much research that is just going, like there's more and more research all the time that's coming out, showing all kinds of different possibilities and how it's affecting. Just as far as, for example, COVID, they're with all the different studies that are going on, they're finding out how many different ways that, the COVID and how, different governments approach things is affecting, everywhere from children to adults.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, post-traumatic stress disorder is something that I think probably a lot more people are dealing with right now that they don't even realize.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Jason. It's been an absolute pleasure as always.
Thank you, Wade. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Wade. Please stay on stage because I want to do that funny thing, where we get to know Jared a lot more. Want to have let's have some rapid fire questions. Okay. So I've been thinking, okay, and I'll try to be as quick as possible. Okay, so my first question to you is that what is your favorite emoji? And you have like 5 seconds.
So it's a custom emoji, and it's Guy Fieri, who is a chef that has hilarious hair, and he's doing the chef's kiss emoji. So it's the same like chef's kiss emoji, but it's Guy Fieri with his funny hair.
All right, it's very interesting. I have never seen you sending me any text with that emoji. Please send it.
I'll find it.
Okay, all right. Next question which I have. What is the most unusual place you have ever fallen asleep?
Unusual place I've ever fallen asleep. That's a tough one. I don't really sleep that well in other places, so I mostly sleep in my bed, but I've blacked out from substance use in very peculiar places, if that helped.
Yeah, let's name one.
So yeah, I mean, I've blacked out on stage and performed entire sets without even realizing I was in the environment, and then came to the next day being like, wow, I actually just DJ'd all night and don't remember a single thing. So yeah, drugs can sometimes not be the best.
All right. So I have a common question for everyone. The question is, what's the silliest fear you have? Okay, and just because we have Wade on stage, I'm going to start with Wade and then I'll reach out to you, Jared. So Wade, what's the silliest fear you have?
Oh, gee. Silliest fear. I'll be very polite. Getting crapped on from a bird above.
That's a good one.
Getting
I mean, that's like
crap.
pretty silly. Yeah.
What about you, Jared?
I don't know if I could beat that. I don't know if I can top it. The silliest fear. This one's maybe a little more serious, but the fear that everything won't be okay. That's a silly fear, right? Because I think everything will be okay.
Uh-huh. Yeah, makes sense. Makes total sense. Okay, now
What
let's
about you,
actually.
Jason?
I have
Actually,
fear.
yeah, Jason.
Yeah, the serious fear I have. Okay, and I'm glad you brought this up. Okay, I have a fear of short heights. That's my silliest fear. Like 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot. Like if I look
Interesting.
down, yeah, I get scared,
Yeah.
as if like I'm gonna die. So that's my fear.
Not
So a
as-
fear
not
of
as
heights,
difficult.
but not big heights.
Not big heights. You put me on Mount Everest, I should be pretty okay. Like, but if you if you put me somewhere which is small in terms of height, and if you ask me to look down, I don't know, I just get weird feelings. So that's the most silliest fear I have. Okay, I don't know if it's some phobia. I don't know. I have no idea what the fuck it is. So that's my
It's
take.
not a sense of vertigo, right?
Yeah, something of that sort. So, anyways,
Interesting.
Jared, I want to give you the opportunity to promote yourself. Let the listeners know how people can reach out to you. Your website is jaredliebel.ca. Okay.
Yeah, jaredlabelle.ca. For now, anyways, I'm still determining when I'm going to launch my business, but so far I've soft launched as kind of just like myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Why didn't you name the website Only Child instead of Jared Label?
To be honest, I quit my job and then immediately got contracts. I just haven't had a time to build a new website. So this was actually my personal portfolio that I've had for a while now. So I'm working on my branding and my website and everything, and I have some stuff formulated, but just haven't really had time to put
Yeah.
the gas pedal down, I guess.
Do you have any upcoming podcast appearance or maybe events which are happening? Anything you like to promote?
No, not really. I think I plan on, taking a little bit of downtime this summer. So I'm actually going to take a step back from work and just focus on the contracts and then just try and enjoy myself. So I'll probably be less active for this summer and then back, marketing myself a little bit more heavily once like the fall kind of comes around. But I've committed to myself to sort of spend the next time reflecting while doing work, but also just kind of like discovering what I want to launch. So
Absolutely.
but yeah, I don't have anything planned, I don't think. Anyways, I'll have to. Oh no, actually, sorry, this Friday I'm actually doing a live webinar with the RGD called Freshly Certified. So I just got certified with the RGD, which is an Ontario organization that offers supports for graphic designers in Canada. So I'm basically going to be with other designers and some committee members, showcasing how I presented my projects, and sort of just giving insights on how to prepare for certification and sort of the benefits that you can get out of it, and sort of what certification with the RGD looks like. So if you want to understand sort of how to set up your presentations and portfolio, if you want to understand what the benefits are, if you're curious about it, then it's definitely something that's good to sign up for. I think we're already at close to like 100 attendees, so it should be a pretty busy and packed digital room, so to speak, and lots of good insights. So
That is
I think
super
that's
cool.
Friday at 3.
Do you if you can post the link under the event comments, so whoever is
Yeah.
listening on LinkedIn would be able to take advantage of it. That is super cool, my friend. That is super cool. I meant to ask you that question. What does RGD means next to your name? And I'm so glad you answered it. I thought it's a part of your name. Maybe it was some sort of a professional degree or some acronym to some course or something which you did. That's what I was assuming. Okay, but this is really interesting. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
so it's the Registered Graphic Designers of Ontario. I think it's going national, but essentially it's kind of like a certification similar to like an accountant becoming certified. And I guess it's just unfortunate that graphic designers don't really have like a certification, but I guess really they're just a union.
Yeah, that is
But they
super
support
cool.
graphic designers and the ethics. So
Yeah. For graphic designers, it would have been. It would be nice to have that. Yeah, I totally agree. But nowadays graphic designers are super smart. We call all of us, majority of us would call ourselves as strategists and graphic.
100%.
All right. So I want to actually let people know about our next week's event, episode 13. Crafting a Tasty Content Recipe by Wendy Lieber. I have the links to this under the event notes. If you look me up on LinkedIn, you should be able to find links to that specific event. I would highly encourage people who are listening, all the 200 people listening, please RSVP for this specific event. And I do my show every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My podcast name has been changed to The Dark Side of Entrepreneurship. Just want to keep you guys in the loop once again. And I would highly encourage you to check out some of the merch. Your support would really make a lot of difference. It's also going to create an additional revenue stream for my podcast. As you know, podcasting does not actually bring money. We just do it out of passion. Anything which can help us to, compensates for the time we spend creating this content, that would really help. So do you have anything, Jared, you want to say before we wrap today's conversation? Anything you'd like to share before we wrap up? Okay, you're on mute just in case. Okay, maybe you got a call. But anyways, I'm just gonna go ahead and wrap today's show. Thank you so much, guys, for your love and support. Please take care.
Sorry, Jason.
Go ahead.
I was having some trouble unmuting, but I have nothing else to share. Thank you for having me on. It was a great conversation, and I'm happy to share all this information, and hopefully we can stay in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, guys. Please take care of yourself. Have a lovely morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're in the world. I appreciate this very, very much. Please take care.
Bye.